In order for the director to actually send enemies to attack the player, we have to decide what patterns the director is going to send and how the director is going to send that. We can control this through initiating a trigger. The best way to do this is to set up a zone in our area. So we have a SHMUP level. What we're going to do is we're going to place a zone right in front of the player, so they'll enter it as soon as they start playing the game. Then we'll need to add a trigger, which uses a zone as a condition. Set director state. So let's add a new condition, and we'll make it on position enter zone. We'll select the new zone that we created, which is zone 238. Which reminds me that we need to adjust some of the properties of this zone. I can go and find it in the object editor, or since it's selected, I can hit this question mark button. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we set the activation limit to 1. We only want this to happen once, not multiple times. The player enters it multiple times. In addition, you'll notice that this zone already has a move ability set up for it with the auto scroll checked. That's because we created this zone in a SHMUP level, as we can see by the SHMUP UI type. And what that does is it lets the zone know that this is going to be in a SHMUP, and so we want that to scroll along with the level, so it inhibits that physical space as opposed to just a space on the screen. Now that we have our enter zone for this condition created for this zone, what we need to do is we need to add our change director behavior and change director pattern actions. We'll start off with the behavior. And we start with that first because that indicates how we want to spawn objects in this current section of it. There's a bunch of properties here which indicate sort of how the director goes through its various states and how intense the encounters are that the player is facing. But the defaults here will serve us just fine. And so we're going to spend a bit more time taking a look at the spawn population, which indicates what types of things the director can use to fulfill the conditions up above. In this case, what we're interested in is the chance counts. Every time the director goes to spawn a pattern, what it does is it makes a roll and it determines what type of enemies it's going to send, or what type of pattern it's going to send. In this case, we have sweeper chance at 1, which means we have a 100% chance of there being sweepers. If we drop this down to something around 50 and bulker to around 0.5, then we have a 50% chance of either of these values happening. But we just made a sweeper pattern, so we're going to want our sweeper chance to be maxed out. Next, we're going to add a change director patterns, and this allows us to indicate specifically what patterns the director is going to use. We can set, add, or remove patterns from the director, and then finally we can select what pattern we want to do. This pattern selection is exactly like the pattern selection in the pattern editor. In this case, we sort it by enemy type, and seeing how we set it to only spawn sweepers, we want to make sure we select a sweeper pattern. In this case, we're going to select the pattern that we just made. As far as set, add, and remove, that indicates how we're going to give this information to the director. If we set the pattern, that means we ignore any of the patterns that the director was previously using and just use this pattern. If we add it, that means we add this pattern to the director's collection of currently used patterns, and if we remove it, then we remove this specific pattern from the director's collection. We're going to go with set right now because I don't care about what the director was doing before this. I want to make sure that this is the only pattern that the director is using. And with that set up, we can give it a test. As soon as it starts up, I enter in, and then we get enemies spawning from our pattern. These are fully interactable enemies that I can go ahead and start fighting. Now it's only doing this one pattern over and over again. So, as we indicated before, we can go ahead and change this up by adding more patterns. If I add another change director pattern, I go in and I select a different type of pattern. Let's go the 3 sweeper super cross 1, and I'm going to add this pattern. When the first thing runs, we'll set this pattern, and then we'll go ahead and add this pattern. So we should have 2 different types of patterns that the director will send at us. And now we got a different type of pattern and our original pattern. And that's how you can control what patterns the director sends to the player.